with you all. It's rare that we get such good thought leaders who are pace setters in their own field to be together. So thank you, Prachi, Madhura, Rahul. Chintan, of course, for you, it was a call of duty, but still I'm saying thank you to you. Yeah, so I mean, what is CICO? I get asked this question quite often everywhere. You know, what is CICO? What is that, you know, your connection with IIM Ahmedabad, and how do you guys function? What do you do, etc. So I think the expanse and breadth of what we do at CICO is so wide that it's sometimes difficult to put it in a sentence or so. Nevertheless, I've tried it that CICO essentially is, of course, a technology business incubator of IIM Ahmedabad. It is an innovative extension of IMA, but it's essentially a continuum that promotes, creates, and supports a virtuous cycle that transforms the lives of underserved, tackles some of the most difficult problems. So we have essentially two school of thoughts or two strategic arms. One is, of course, innovation. The second one is innovation for inclusion. Of course, the fact that any innovation is going to be inclusive in the long run. But at CICO, there are certain things we don't take it for granted. And one of that is that we don't believe in trickle down. So that is why we have this specifically focused initiatives towards inclusion. And BII is one of them. BII stands for Bharat Inclusion Initiative. Rahul is, I think, from the first batch of the BII startup cohort. So there was a study where we saw, you know, the bottom 50% of Indian population, their wealth had eroded. This bottom 50% population did not have the luxury of risk management in terms of insurance or any other thing. So we thought, why not create something that will build wealth for these people? And together with our partners, Prachi is here from the Dell Foundation, Gates Foundation, JP Morgan, and of course, MetLife, which came on board a little later. We started this initiative, which was, of course, quite iconoclast in its own. And we said, you know, we will try to build wealth. And we have learned quite a bit through that. I mean, there's a particular startup idea, which is also going to, apart from building wealth, is, you know, also trying to eradicate a particular vice called single digit lottery. Yeah. So I think the topic has already been introduced, so I'll not go into that. The panelists have been introduced, so I'll not go into that. So, I mean, in case there is something else that anyone from panelists wish to add, especially Chintan, do you wish to add anything on this? Then we can straight away go into the initial comments.
No, nothing at this point in time. Thank you.
Okay. So, Prachi, can I start with you? Okay. So, I mean, I wanted to essentially see, you know, how do you think that technology business incubation per se, when it is embedded with entrepreneurship, how can it create a sustainable development model?
Thanks, Salim. Thanks for setting it up so well. And there'll be several examples from our work at CII itself, which will demonstrate it well. But I thought I'll start with putting out a basic framework, which is very much along the direction of what you said, innovation for inclusion theme. But, you know, what has been, you know, our framework and how have we seen different social enterprises deliver on that framework? So Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, we believe, you know, in driving impact for the bottom of the pyramid, being agnostic to how that impact is being achieved. So whether it is getting achieved through, you know, for-profit social enterprises, as it is being called today, or through not-for-profits, their work, or even directly working with the government. And each one of them has a role to play. It's not about the, you know, the role is different. It's not whether it's a bigger role or a smaller role. The role is very different. And I would say even sustainability in all of them is very different. But when it comes to social enterprises, I think sustainability is at the front and center of the model always. Every social enterprise is always thinking, okay, what really is that innovation that I'm driving to be able to sell the service to a very discerning target population, right? This is an extremely value conscious target segment, which is at, you know, which is at the big mass in India. And therefore, I would say that, you know, two things which have been essential in this framework. One has been the quality of service, and by quality of service product, I mean that it is relevant for who you are selling. It's superior to what was their alternative before you introduced your product or service. So, there are many aspects to relevance, quality, I would say. The second is sustainability, which is at the front and center of it. And the third, I think, is just the amount of, talent or the amount of innovation that team is finally being able to drive. So these are, typically the things that we are looking for to say, okay, this brings in a lot of innovation in the sector. This brings in a way that it's actually superior to what were the choices before that. And, it will be sustainable at the core of it. And, the reason why we have invested either in these organizations directly or in accelerators and incubators which promote and support these organizations is that there is a role to be played at that very early stage. And that role is for us to be able to take that risk till that bet has played out, to show that this is possible and to show that, this is something which can actually create impact at scale. So that for us is a very important objective to be felt in the overall development ecosystem. And the second equally important objective is that of building impact in the DNA of the organization per se. One could argue today that why do this at early stage? There are so many other for-profit, bigger enterprises which can actually have an arm which does, which provides inclusion services, but it has not happened and also does not happen in practice in general. So it's important to have that DNA from the, customer centricity, inclusion, impact orientation from the very beginning. And for that reason, we have found it very useful to engage and promote and support organizations from an early stage. So as we go along, I can give some examples of that, but let me pause here.
Sure. Thank you, Prachi. Madhura, can I jump to you with a question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Salim.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what I asked Prachi, but something more general from the corporate side, because you represent corporate CSRs, is why do you think technology business incubation is so much more relevant now? I mean, especially now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me over here. Technology incubation and why is it more relevant? I think it has always been relevant. Unfortunately, it doesn't grab the eyeballs or the funding from the corporates as it really deserves. We've seen it as one of the bottommost priorities, or even the funding share for the 2% funding that's available for us. A country which needs to be, self-reliant. Now we are jumping into this bandwagon. We're talking very loudly about, being Atmanirbhar, right? If we have to be self-reliant on key initiatives, we need to promote entrepreneurship more so. We need to celebrate, we need to understand, and support technology incubators, startup in whichever way that we can. And I think a channel or a bridge that's been made available. And of course, the push has also been stronger in the last couple of years. Now, even some funding can be given to R&D. I don't think many of the corporates are understanding the value and the benefit of doing this, per se, and how it can benefit their, their own stakeholders or your own circle at which they can actually work together on this. We are more set up in a traditional mindset of, corporate philanthropy, corporate giving. What does it mean to, alleviate poverty? There are different ways to do it, and what better way to do it by creating more entrepreneurs, creating more, self-reliant technologies. You don't need to invent the wheels. There are lots of things that are available right now that can be done. There's a lot of space that can be taken up. And if there are good platform organizations that help incubate, help support, which more so then goes on to create more employment. Now, if anybody over here would understand that the scenario in India, where there is a case of formal employment and not so formal employment in India, obviously we are not able to provide, and I don't think any country can go to that extent. But these kinds of technology incubators, setups, promoting entrepreneurs can create a whole lot of chain. It can have a cascading effect to even create more and more of gainful employment. So I think, yes, it is extremely important to support technology incubators and in some form to see that we are then moving to the next level and competing in a fierce world in such a way that we are actually making our generations more stronger and more reliant in their own abilities, and also develop technologies which are easily replicable or profitable.
Yeah, thank you, Madhura. So key points from Prachi and Madhura include impact at scale, impact in DNA, and Madhura, you made the important point of a self-replicating system. So I'll now jump to Rahul. Rahul, I know there'll be a lot of people very interested to know, how, can you paint a picture as to how it was when you first started out? What was it, pressure from your friends, from your batchmates, others, family, etc. And how did you decide to do this? And how, a follow-up question to that would be, how has the philanthropic capital helped you in this journey?
Yeah, so I think I'll start just by giving a little context about myself and the company. So I'm the co-founder of Navana Tech, as you guys know now. But Navana Tech ended up building voice technologies for the next billion users, because we started with a mission to enable the next billion users to be able to use digital services with independence and confidence. This was our mission from day zero, before we had any idea what product we were building, what technologies we would have to build. And when you are at that stage, philanthropic capital actually allows you the flexibility to explore what it is you actually have to build to achieve the mission. So most businesses, for-profit businesses, would start with a business model and say, guys, this is how we're going to build this business. I need this capital, and this is the kind of return you're going to get in X amount of time. Philanthropic capital allows you to say, guys, this is the impact I want to have, and this is the area in which we're going to be working, and this is the team's capabilities. We're going to figure out how to achieve that. So that's when Navana Tech was 3 years ago, when CIIE and BII took us on board as part of the first cohort. And I have to say, just being part of BII was had immense impact on Navana and allowed us that flexibility to actually do a few things. One was to spend some time actually doing user research, spending time with the end customer. We traveled across the country for the first 10 months, just doing research, speaking to customers in 10 different states who spoke 12 different languages, doing 1 hour long interviews with each customer, and just understanding, how do you use your smartphone today? Do you have a smartphone? If you are the wife in the house, does that really mean you have access to a smartphone or not? Because we talk about access at the household level. So, we did a lot of this research to understand what type of technology would really make an impact here and allow users who typically are extremely afraid of entering the digital ecosystem because they are specifically lower literate than you and I are, and therefore feel afraid to take steps when they enter a digital service. So they just do not enter the digital service at all. After all of this research and having the opportunity to find visionary customers like Ujjivan Small Finance Bank to work with us to find those types of solutions, we landed on conversational voice technology in Indian languages. And we've built that out. So now we have actually built out speech recognition, natural language processing from the ground up in 9 Indian languages with an average of 4 dialects per language, to be able to enable two-way communication between low literate users all across the country and access digital services in finance, agriculture, healthcare, and even e-commerce.
Thank you, Rahul. So impact first and areas of market failure. Chintan, I wanted to pick your brains on this. Very specifically, do you think within the universe of startups and the development goals, do we see any intersection between these two?
Yeah, thanks, Salim. Yeah, I think it's a very relevant fit, and I can really talk from both my experiences as an entrepreneur and then as part of CIICo, where I've been on the other side of the table. Let me start by sharing my experiences of being a social entrepreneur back in 2006, when this marriage had not happened, right? So that time, the startup that I, along with my co-founder, started was, in fact, we did not use the term social enterprise at that point of time. We we would typically call it a startup or a tech startup. What we were trying to do is we were trying to use Wi-Fi, which was a fairly new technology in 2006, to enable connectivity in rural areas at a fairly low cost. Our goal or our objective was fundamentally social. My co-founders, both of us are very clear that, and we had all been influenced to a large extent by the C.K. Prahalad book on Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. And we could see that by using technology, by using smart business models, you can reach out to the poor and underserved, and actually sell them goods and services. And that's what we are really trying to do. Our objectives were social impact. We were all from great backgrounds. My co-founder was from MIT. I mean, I was also from the best colleges in India, etc. So we had that social objective, and we were able to get initial funding from the US. My co-founder was from the US. But when we started scaling up in India and then we started approaching investors, we found ourselves in this very strange dilemma. When we would go to grant-making organizations, they would consider us as a for-profit, a commercial sort of an enterprise, right? So they would say that why are you coming to us? We only fund non-profits. I mean, what Madhura was talking about. You need to be directly working with the poor and hunger and all those kind of things were at the top of their bucket list. Then we said, okay, let's go to the VCs, and we went to the regular, and there were not many at that point of time. 2007, 8 is what I'm talking about, and they would sort of look at us as a social initiative, which is done in a for-profit manner. We did not have that scalability. They were looking at more scalable sort of business models, make my trip, this, that, etc. And that's where I kind of first felt the need for this kind of blended capital, someone who understands the need for development, but at the same time also realizes the fact that through the for-profit enterprise model, the developmental impact can be scaled up manyfold. Of course, it started to happen now. Now, if I move to the other side of the table, what we have been, the work that we have been doing at CIICo, that's essentially what we have been doing. We have been trying to convince and work with partners like Bajaj, the other foundations, CSRs, etc., and sort of helping them kind of understand and document the impact that can potentially be created by working with startups, which are further working with the rural poor, bottom of the pyramid, etc. So, as Madhura mentioned, while it's still the tip of the iceberg, but the situation is much better. If I look at comparing it to 2006, 2007, a lot needs to be done. I think there are, and these are my last comments, I think there are a couple of things which probably need to happen for more comfort level to come into CSRs. There probably needs to be much more sort of documentation and awareness generation and dissemination of successful case studies. Probably we also need to do a better job. I think most of these, while non-profits have impact measurement, etc., as part of their DNA, a lot of the startup founders are not necessarily from a non-profit developmental background. They are typical, tech guys or business guys. So they probably are not great in terms of measuring their impact and therefore communicating it back to their donors, etc. So I think these things are changing, but these are a couple of areas where I think improvement needs to happen before it becomes more mainstream. And more CSRs and development funding organizations will look at it as a kind of best of both the worlds, where not only the development outputs are getting created, but the sustainability and scale is also inbuilt.
Sure, Chintan, thank you. If I can ask a follow-up question to that, you mentioned your story, but for our audience, if you could give us a couple of quick case studies, these startups who have actually done a phenomenal job, which you have seen and your team has managed. Sure.
Yeah, I think there are many hundreds of startups that we have supported. I'll just pick up a couple of examples. So there's a startup which we came across as part of a program that we were doing around crafts. And what we realized was that these guys were doing a fairly interesting, in fact, the impact was happening on two fronts. So these guys were actually picking up waste, chicken waste, and they had a technology for which they have an IP, and they were converting it into fabric, which was really high quality fabric, and it was a hand spinning, hand loom sort of a process. So it was also, the process was sustainable in terms of the conversion, and they were creating great fabric out of it, creating some products out of it. So not only was there social impact, but also environmental impact, because it's a huge environmental hazard. I mean, all the chicken butchery waste, etc., which goes around. And these guys have been struggling for a couple of years. I mean, they had been doing pilots here and there, trying to get orders and all that. And through a program that we had done for supporting social enterprises, we were able to fund them, I think, to the extent of 40 to 50 lakhs and all that. And they have been able to organize it. Of course, our programs also come in with a lot of mentoring, with a lot of service provider support, connects, networking, etc. So they were able to formalize a lot of the stuff that they were able to do on the back end as well as the front end. They've been now able to raise follow-on funding. They have started getting orders from Europe, where they are able to see the environmental benefit of all these things. I mean, it's still at an early stage, but I think it's ready to take off. That's one example.
That's Khanak, right, Chintan?
That's Khanak. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention the name of the startup. It's called it's Khanak, and they are alumni of a design college based out of Jaipur. Another quick example, if I were to just pick another one, is a company called MedCords, which is now fairly successful. They have raised a couple of rounds of funding, and we were the first seed investors when they had virtually no revenues, and they were trying to basically digitize rural prescriptions, essentially with the objective of to avoid trips of the patient to the urban center. So most rural folks would go to an urban place where a famous doctor is there, and they would sort of go there for even for follow-ups and all that. So their objective was that for the first time you'll go there, but through digitization, you can actually do follow-ons over a call, and the doctor can see your prescription. So they had tried to rope in the local chemist who would do the digitization and all that. Now they are almost like a full-scale telemedicine and and online delivery, medicine delivery service, but focusing completely on the rural areas. They've been able to raise Series A funding. So yeah, that's another example where almost at a prototype, proof of concept, pre-revenue stage, where typically a commercial investor or a angel investor would not have come in. We were able to see the impact as well as the future potential, commercial potential of what they were doing, and were able to back them.
Yeah, thank you, Chintan. So I have noted down a few points that you have mentioned. You say that these technologies actually promote affordability and accessibility. And just to make sure that our audience don't get that is all commercial in the investment, Chintan was essentially showing the success or the self-replication within the system that is built in. So Chintan, I also take another takeaway from what you have said is that there are key barriers to the innovation, and this coming together of the corporates and industry and startups will help us resolve some of the major barriers to innovation. Yeah, thank you, Chintan. If I can jump back to Rahul, for what specific solutions that you build at Navana are the ones that help Bharat segment. So Bharat segment, for our audience benefit, is a segment that earns up to $5 a day per person family income. Yes, Rahul.
Yeah, so I can talk about a few of our deployments. What we had launched, we've actually launched 2 months ago with the Maharashtra government. What we had noticed was that users were finding it extremely difficult to navigate the CoWIN platform. And what we thought was it would be, we would be able to open up accessibility by creating a completely voice-enabled WhatsApp bot where users can come in and speak Marathi to the WhatsApp bot just by sending a voice note, register themselves onto CoWIN, book an appointment, go to the appointment and receive their certificate, all without ever having to type a single letter into WhatsApp or ever having to go to the CoWIN website. So we launched that bot a couple of months ago with the Maharashtra government. So we saw some great uptick there and actual end users using this system with independence and confidence. So that was one deployment that we thought was quite interesting and kind of solved things at the bottom of the pyramid. The other use case again falls within a WhatsApp voice bot use case. The reason we focus on WhatsApp is because most of these users, if they do have a smartphone, they are already in WhatsApp and know how to use WhatsApp versus having to download another application to access more services. So we're trying to reach the end users where they already are and give them a medium that they are already comfortable with, which is just spoken word and audio feedback in that same language. So the second use case, which we've deployed now for about 4 or 5 months, is a crop-based advisory bot for chili farmers in Andhra Pradesh. So this is completely in Telugu and provides users information on weather, gives them feedback on their crop and how well or how healthy or unhealthy their crop is based on questions that they ask. So we've built out a whole knowledge base for agri. We also soon to launch with Ujjivan Small Finance Bank, which is a completely voice-enabled application for their 5 million low literate female customers. And that's a completely handheld flow for users. The moment they enter the application, there are 9 languages, and it guides users through the registration process, points at things on the screen, and just takes them as someone in an assisted format would do, but directly within the application. So that is soon to launch. That's everything on our speech recognition and NLP side of the business. We've also built out a completely SaaS-based product called Zaban, which is a vernacular voice guidance tool. This allows businesses to, within a few days, add voice guidance to their applications or websites in any number of languages that they choose, and guide users through complicated flows like registration flows or payment flows or checkout flows, and allows businesses to add that in. So we have about currently 1 million monthly active users running through Zaban systems across our customers today, and all focused on Bharat users. So the goal is improving the funnel completion rates for the business and making it easier for end users of that service to go through that. So yeah, happy to share those use cases right now.
Thank you, Rahul. So audience, in case you want to know more about us, more about Navana Tech and other startups, please visit our booth. You will have my colleagues there to help you out. And I can promise you quite a scintillating conversation. Prachi, if I can circle back to you on this, how can technology business incubation, per se, and more in particular, entrepreneurship, benefit the development stakeholders, including the not-for-profit, CSRs, and other initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, the benefits are many, but things which really stand out are the speed at which the impact comes. And I'll give an example of it. It just completely changes the pace which was in the sector pre some of these technology use cases that we've seen. So pace, I think speed is one very big thing. Scale is, of course, completely different. We cannot even imagine such a scale without technology. And the quality of solutions is usually more superior than what we have seen without technology. And let me just give 2 examples from our direct portfolio, which show that, because both are social enterprises, but very different in nature. So the first one is an edtech company called Convergenius that we've been invested in. It's an early stage company when we had come in almost 6 years ago. And, they had started with solving the problem of edtech at the bottom of the pyramid, saying that, we'll provide the content on tablets to kids, but train the teachers to start using it in classrooms. And they actually worked with a lot of foundations and CSRs to help their existing programs and existing children starting to use technology, and have had a very successful drive at that. But really where the power of their technology was amazing was during the school lockdowns when COVID happened. So the lockdowns happened in March, and by April, like the end of March, beginning of April, these guys were live in more than 3 or 4 states, having moved their entire solution to a WhatsApp-based solution, much like what Raul was saying. Their going in hypothesis were, 85% of my kids are already on WhatsApp in some of the states. Teachers are already on WhatsApp. Let me just connect them and let me start sending the data. And there's a lot of education work that went behind it. But, I think, first of all, the thinking was so rapid to say that, okay, the world has not stopped, education cannot stop, schools have shut down, what do I do? But just the pace of thinking, the speed of execution was so fast. And by the middle of 2020 or towards the end of 2020, they actually had 13 million kids across more than 9 state governments who were already on that platform. And they were sending content and all, but they were also sending a Saturday quiz, which for that week's content was quizzing the kids whether they learned or not. And they started sending that data back to the governments, saying that, this is what kids are learning, stop the one-way communication. Here is the data back for you. 85% kids have taken it, 40% kids actually got the answer right or wrong, started developing a PWA towards it. So like the scale, the speed, the quality, and the solution is now here to stay. We've been talking to several states who've been using the solution and then saying, even when we reopen the schools, why would we let go of having that interactivity with our kids on, at home? It's so good to be able to follow up with them at home, to have them study at home, to be able to get that data back. You can't even get that data back when you physically test kids and, have those answer sheets available to you. You just cannot see it at that scale, at that level, especially at the, at the central level for a state. So that's I think one example which it's a complete paradigm shift from whatever we've seen in education, and has just moved the system from where it was to a newer reality where it benefits the kids, it benefits those government stakeholders. And, this is something I would think, more funding organizations and more CSRs should look at, that, can we actually create such an impact? And if yes, then why not engage with social enterprises? The second quick example I would give is a very different organization, because a lot of conversation I know today will be around product companies, around service, very, very focused on solving a problem through a product. But we've been partnering with another social enterprise called Samadra Governance, which is a consulting firm. They're a governance consulting firm. They actually go and work with the governments to make their systems more efficient. It's again a social enterprise. It fills a need area, which we all know exists in India. The team actually comes out of the UID team and has a lot of that thinking around how digital systems need to be put in place. How do you set governance and systems and processes around it? And it's such a huge, huge area of need, which no one in the mainstream industry is filling. And they are putting only 5-6 people, project management unit in the team, but the amount of technology that they use to simplify the government processes, to be able to just provide that data-led decision making and visibility to the senior government stakeholders, completely changes the conversation on how, for example, how benefit schemes should be designed. Are they being delivered or not? Do we need to change something around it? So like there's so many use cases that are there. Usually they're coming from our social enterprises, and they're almost always bringing about a paradigm shift.
Thank you, Prachi. So not just alignment, but it can actually increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the development activities and projects. Madhura, if I can circle back to you, you were one of the first set of corporates that came forward and supported us and helped us both to support startups as well as to create a fantastic infrastructure for startups at Jaipur. So wanted to understand, what was the key motivation for Bajaj to do this, and also how has been your experience in working with us?
Yes. So, frankly speaking, a lot of it was led by our erstwhile joint managing director, the late Anand Bajaj. He was very young and passionate and enthusiastic and had a greater connect. And I think you guys have interacted with him also when he used to come on the campus on various occasions. While we were known as a Bajaj Electricals company, we were largely more, we have different lines of business: consumer, electricals, transmission lines, power distribution. One of the areas which we were looking at to look at an entrepreneurship was in alternative renewable energies. We do have projects right now going on, with partners in Ladakh, in the Northeast, because we wanted to be very inclusive in geographies. So we spread thin very consciously. Many people thought that this may not be the right thing, but I always remembered him saying that no, we must go. We must go to the areas where others cannot go, and we can actually create demonstrable, projects or models. And in that sense, we approach a lot of, esteemed institutions who could work on technology, incubate projects, at a rapid space, because actually speaking, solar did not require that much of kind of an, deep-based technology intervention or something like that. But we could have created entrepreneurs who would be agnostic to products and could service, different categories and to the communities which were completely off-grid. So our journey started like that. And also philosophically, if you see, even 100 years ago, we would have our, founder, Shri Jamalal Bajaj ji, would be praying, saying that, God grant me the wisdom, to not just, be prosperous in my business, but good sense to utilize it for the benefit of the country. So this sense of being, hardcore nationalist or wanting to work for the welfare of the community of the country is very, very deep seated with the Bajaj Group. Also, the fact that Anant was a kind of a very different, a thinker or a communicator. In fact, in 2017, I would spend 1 minute talking about this, was, when you are taking the best of your organization for your yearly awards and recognition, you would take them to some places fancy, make them feel good. We had our awards and recognition ceremony in a place called as the Vasa Museum. I don't know how many of you all know that. Vasa Museum is in Stockholm, Sweden. It's basically a museum of failure, So we actually went there, we had booked that place, and we had this awards night in that particular place. And before we went for the awards night, all the achievers were taken across to what the Vasa Museum was about, what failure is all about, and how failures can build you. And anybody over here would know that when you're talking about startups, when you're talking about entrepreneurs or enterprise, you need to understand and you need to have an appetite for failures, right? Unless you have that. And that is why you need organizations like CIE or any of these institutes which want to keep the hub, or the control to promote or keep this touch with these guys, or girls going, and promoting their work. So I think we've had a very good understanding with CIE. In fact, not much of a trouble. We did try so like I said, we've had success and we've had failures even in trying to identify good partnerships in getting into this space. And it is a challenging space. I am sure Chintan and Salim know much more about this than I do. I also belong to a family, a very middle class family who's tried to be, who's, maybe a generation or two, been wanting to be entrepreneurs, having lost a lot, or wiped out the entire capital, from their respective houses. So why this sentiment needs to be appreciated and to be understood, and then to be connected to the right kind of people with the right kind of passion, the right kind of intelligence, the right kind of wisdom, who may not have everything, but something which can push their enterprises. So I think that is why it was very important for us, like I said, to get into these partnerships. We created, in fact, and we were a little patient. You can check with CIE if I'm lying. The entire Anand Bajaj Limitless Ideas Hub, which was created in Rajasthan, and it was supposed to be launched exactly 3 years ago, but then COVID struck, and obviously we couldn't move forward, and we were moving at a nail pace, and I had to go back to my board 100 times over to say, no, we cannot park the funds, we cannot do this, we have to, and they were also very, very, very good with the communications, and finally we did launch, I think, a couple of months back, and the center is taken on board and is going to support, I think, about thousands of entrepreneurs in the coming years. Basically, I think there are 3 or 4 agendas, right? I think, if I remember correct, women entrepreneurs, or they're going to have entrepreneurs focusing on the youth, focusing on traditional crafts, and also on technology startups. Of course, they will be taking in support of other corporates who would want to contribute more, or the Department of Science and Technology, and so on and so forth. But at least one center has taken shape and has been flagged off, with a lot of effort. And there is a lot of effort at everybody's end to even get this going. Like I said, but if you have an appetite for failure, this is an arena which you and you should have, because corporates have risen, especially all the corporates in India which are family based over the decades, who have actually created wealth, can definitely want or should look at investing a little bit of their we are not such big funders in CSR. Bajaj Electricals, I'm talking, the group is of course very big, but we do try to invest our funds in such a way that each and every project becomes unique, becomes a demonstrable project, so that the others can emulate. Because we personally feel in the CSR domain, there is nothing like, unless it's like competition or it's like a business, it's nothing like you're going to patent something. More people understand what business models are. We want to show that yes, you should work in Ladakh, you should work in Mizoram, you should create off-grid electrification through supporting entrepreneurs. So we do a whole lot of job, and it is tiring, because many times I have to review my projects over and over, because they have not met with their basic memorandum of understanding. The legal team's knocking my door saying that can we again have an addendum MOU, because funds have not been expended. So a lot of things go back and forth. But like I said, if you're going to be very straightjacketed and you want very nice looking projects, there are a lot of other things that can be done. This is a tough terrain, but I would definitely recommend more and more people to get involved in it. We also try to ensure that the corporate, of course, when Anant was there, more so, like we had a program called as Navachar, where we encouraged young entrepreneurs to join in and give us technology solutions for the problems faced for electricity in India. And it was a huge contest that was run. We received many applications, and I think the top contenders were then called to the R&D and then were given an award to work on it. So like even the company is quite sensitive and quite progressive in the sense to look at having an interaction or interface, not just through CSR programs, but even its hardcore R&D and other departments or BUs. Yes, Salim, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Madhura, for kind words, and truly a patient capital. And thank you for those words. If I, Prachi, Chintan, or Rahul would have used it, people have said it's a cliche. So fail fast, fail often. I just didn't want to use it because it's so cliche. Thank you for that. And truly, thank you for all your support. In fact, we have the Bajaj Hub video on our stall. I would request people who want to go and see. It's a fantastic hub. Please have a look at it. Before I move to the closing, Chintan, I know that you are aware of this story about the Bharat Biotech Covaxin, which is one of the world's best vaccine that has come out of the system, and that was through a catalytic grant given to it by Technology Development Board. And please correct me if I'm wrong here. The TDB is what went on to become the Department of Science and Technology. Yeah, so I mean, if anybody wants to look at a use case of what potential a business incubation or an idea can have, can look at Covaxin or Bharat Biotech. So way back in '96, when a couple of people came back from US and tried to set it up, they got this small catalytic capital, and they have turned it around into a magnificent organization. So that's the kind of impact we're speaking. And as Chintan always says, and I've heard him encourage young entrepreneurs. Yes, I hope everybody's okay with Hindi. कि startup के दुनिया में it's not important कि ये नहीं चला तो क्या होगा. What's important is अगर ये चल गया तो क्या होगा. Yeah. So Chintan, I mean, final words from you on how big an opportunity is business incubation for the corporate CSRs, and what trend do you see in the coming years?
Yeah, no, I think that's what all of us have been discussing, that it makes a lot of sense for CSRs to look at incubation, whether it is scale, whether it is impact, whether it is doing things exponentially, sustainability. However, as Madhura also mentioned, it's a very different beast in that sense, right? I mean, if you were to, let's say, take the case of a CSR which through an incubator, through a DBI, supports 10 startups. Maybe all of them are in the social impact space. Just like a typical venture capital investor, I mean, it will be a portfolio sort of a success. Maybe 10, 20, 30% of them will be successful and therefore create impact. So therefore, I think, at the CSR level, you need to get comfortable with, and it started to happen, get comfortable with the fact that there will be failures. as you also mentioned, Salim, that we need to sort of as long as we are aiming for that larger impact, 10-20% of the portfolio, which can really, or more than, for some of the startups which do not take off, and we go with that sort of a portfolio approach. And that's where TPIs come in, because through a TPI, through an incubator, you get access to 10, 15, 20 social impact startups. Perhaps maybe you're looking at healthcare, so you can invest, and you should be fine with failure. So I think that's one kind of a change which needs to happen within the
Sure.
or I would say that's sort of a learning needs to happen within the CSR ecosystem, that failure is fine, but we are really betting on something big, something much bigger. So I think that's from the supply side. I think on the incubator side, things are of course as good as it can be. I think as per data, there are now close to 300 plus state plus central supported incubators. So in a way, it may be daunting that the number of incubators are so large. But yeah, I mean, and they come in all shapes and sizes. There would be incubators which may not necessarily be focusing on social impact, but there will be incubators which perhaps are we were talking about Northeast, because we have been working with a lot of incubators, supporting them and getting our learnings of CIO to these incubators out there. We recently worked with an incubator and based in Sikkim, and they are doing wonderful work by supporting startups in the entire Northeast. So there would be a lot of these incubators, kind of in some place doing wonderful job. And these are the folks that potentially can deliver exponential outcome to CSRs when we think in terms of impact. So given that the number is large, I mean, it may be a very daunting number to look at, but it also gives a positive impact that 10, 15, 20% of them may be doing wonderful job, and they may be ahead of the curve. The others may catch up at some point of time. And therefore, the numbers that you can potentially now choose from is reasonably large. So I think that's the other positive driver in the industry. The industry itself is fairly new. There are a lot of learnings which are getting disseminated. At CIO this year, we will be releasing another version of our what we call as the incubator handbook, which we disseminate freely, and we did the last one I think in 2017 or 18. It's been 5 years, and there have been a lot of learnings which have happened in the last 5 years, especially in the social impact, environmental impact sort of sector. So all these learnings we will be disseminating. There are other incubators, mature incubators, which are also helping the upcoming TBIs. So I think the incubation industry is also now at a very interesting phase where a lot of learnings have now got accumulated over the last 10, 12 years. The newer incubators, their learning curves are faster. So yeah, I think these 3 or 4 drivers make me quite confident that we are going to see a significant rise in developmental and CSR capital.
Thank you, Chintan. I mean, in the interest of time, there are just a couple of questions which have come in, and I will take it very quickly. Somebody said, "Where are you located?" Well, we are omnipresent anywhere. We have 5 or 6 locations. Get connected with us, and in true DNA style, IMA DNA, we are 24/7, 365. So please connect with us anytime you want. And somebody asked about EdTech, and before I go and give my closing remarks, the EdTech, I think Chintan's team is executing a program with Mitsubishi Finance Group, and we decided to go EdTech way in 2018, which was prior to the whole pandemic episode and all that. So we have the first start advantage, as well as we have done phenomenal job on this. So please connect with Chintan's team to know more about this EdTech startups. And now just a few close. This is entrepreneurship, and how can we not talk about Apple or Steve Jobs, right? So here's to the crazy ones. A few lines from that. The ones who see things differently, and because they change things, they push the humanity, and because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. So I mean, I truly believe that our entrepreneurs and our startup ideas can really change the world with your support, can transform millions of lives. So my appeal to you all, corporates and others, is come on board, support us. Let's develop these interactions further, and we take this today's meeting as just a harbinger to things to come. It would have been great to have this face-to-face, but it's not. But nevertheless, I think, yeah, my narration wouldn't have been as effective as Richard Dreyfuss, but still quite some words. With your support, we can change the game. I truly believe we can change the game. So, ladies and gentlemen, from CICO and its entire team, thank you very much. Thank you, Bhawmik and team, for organizing this. And I'm hoping that the next edition will be a face-to-face where we can also enjoy some good food, cookies, etc. and all that. And my special thank you to panelists for taking out time for this. Thank you very much and have a good day.